Morning report. Well, now let's go back to the story about the Human Rights Commission and how it dealt with a sexual harassment case within its own organisation. The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, is in the Wellington studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Susie.
Are you able to confirm some more of these details, which appear to be now on the public record, that definitively it was the Chief Financial Officer, Kyle Stutter, that we're talking about here?
That's correct. He was the subject of the complaint.
OK. Are you also able to confirm any further precisely what it was he was accused of doing?
No, I can't. I did have a briefing from the Chief Human Rights Commissioner, David Rutherford, last week when I got back from overseas. After I'd seen the media reports, I spoke to him. I got a briefing on what they had done. I got a briefing on a report by an independent barrister on the application of their procedures. And I expressed the view that I thought it was timely for an independent review of the Human Rights Commission's procedures. I took advice from the State Services Commission, and we got to the point where we did yesterday, where I've appointed former Judge Coral Shaw to do that review.
So you're not satisfied that this complaint was handled properly within the organisation that is set up to handle complaints about this sort of thing?
From the media reports, I'm not satisfied about this complaint, but actually I'm more concerned about, and the review will focus more on the procedures, the standing procedures that the Human Rights Commission has for sexual harassment complaints. OK,
because David Rutherford says that the right processes were followed, but it would seem that they're not good enough and they're not best practice from what you're saying.
I don't believe that they are, and one aspect of it that concerns me the most is that the complainant in this case, an unpaid intern at the Human Rights Commission, was required to go through the mediation process with a mediator who, as I understand it, is very close to the Commission and its senior people, and was
it a mediator from the Human Rights Commission that mediated this case?
As I understand it, the mediator has been described as independent, but spends most of his time working for the Commission.
So it was an inside job then?
Well, I just don't think there was sufficient independence. But I get what concerns me more is that the complainant was required to go through that process unsupported and unrepresented. And one thing we know about sexual harassment complaints is that it is a huge step for a victim to lay the complaint in the first place. And it is pretty standard. And I've been involved in sexual harassment procedures and complaints for more than 30 years. It is pretty standard that a person who lays a complaint then has support from the organisation to carry their complaint through the processes.
Was she denied representation?
I don't know the detail about that, but what is pretty clear is she didn't have representation or support going through that process. And that is such a fundamental flaw. It frankly stuns me that the Human Rights Commission procedures don't provide for it, and they didn't ensure that it happened on this occasion.
Was it reasonable for Kyle Stutter then to send an email, as apparently he did, naming the woman and encouraging people to ask him for his side of the story?
No, I don't ever think that it's appropriate for one party to an issue like this to be communicating more broadly. We saw that with the Sarah complaints when Roger Sutton was the subject of a complaint then, and he gave a media conference, and I was very critical of that. That is simply not what should happen in cases like this.
In that case, if this is something that should not have happened in this case, and considering that it is the context of the Human Rights Commission, is it reasonable that Kyle Stutter keeps his job?
Well, that's a matter for the Human Rights Commission as
it is, but I'm asking you as the Justice Minister who's taking a look at this, and you know more detail about this, frankly, than probably just about anybody else in the country. Yeah. What's your call?
Well, I'm not going to pass judgment on the outcome of it. Kyle Stutter, he was the author of actions that were wrong, no question about it. His follow-up conduct, most of it, was actually not unreasonable. Sending an email out to all staff afterwards is something that I don't think could be defended. That said, I think the critical thing here is the Human Rights Commission itself. They're the employer. As Minister, I can't interfere in their employment issues. What I can do is make sure that employees of the Human Rights Commission, as state sector employees, and the Commission as the body that is meant to be the exemplar of human rights issues in New Zealand, is doing the right thing. And up to now, I'm not sure that they are.
Has any regret been expressed to you from the Human Rights Commission about how this case was dealt with?
Their position has been that they have followed their procedures. I'm not sure that the Human Rights Commission, at least the people that I've dealt with in it, accept that their procedures might be flawed. And that's why
they don't accept that they may be flawed in their procedures.
The communications I've had with them suggest to me that they don't believe that their procedures, that there's anything wrong with them. I have a different view, which is why I want somebody independent. And somebody like Coral Shaw, who's a former employment court judge but actually did an amazing work in the UN dealing with a lot of their internal employment issues, she's fully equipped to go and have a look and make a judgment about whether their procedures are up to the mark.
OK, but if they're saying that they don't think there's any problem with their procedures, that's not something that they are admitting to you, at least.
Correct.
That would then mean that this could quite easily happen again and be handled in exactly the same way.
That's why.
And this is one of 3 complaints of this similar nature they've dealt with since 2013.
That's right. And that's why I think, in addition to the failure of the rules or the procedures they've got, I have to wonder whether there is a cultural or attitudinal issue too, which I've asked Coral Shaw to have a look at.
When do you anticipate getting this report back?
I've asked for a report by the end of April. I'm sure that's an acceptable time frame, so I expect to have something by then.
Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming into the studio. Justice Minister Andrew Little there. It's 7:45.
Feedback piling in on this issue. Nick says the Old Boys Network is set up to protect itself and works wonderfully, but has been taken by surprise recently by the huge number of women speaking out.